Another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And we are right now off of coming back from Indianapolis because we spent the weekend, Collin, in Indy at Lucas Oil watching the players that we're going to talk about today on the 2025 Combine winners and losers.
That's right. We took the not so far drive down from Wisconsin to Indy. When it's that close, you gotta, And then, so this was my first time going to the Combine. You went last year, talked about that experience on this podcast last year. And I mean, it was about what you'd expect, but it was like so cool to just see all the guys in person, because it's like you go and you watch the drills and that's one thing, but to like see these like freaks of nature all be in the one place and like jumping 42 inches in the air and running 40 yards in 4.29 seconds. And like, it's just kind of special. And then being able to see like all of the drills and not having to, have NFL Network decide what they're going to show you and what quarterbacks and when they're going to go to commercial and what guys. So I think it was pretty fun to just take in the full experience and, have a couple brews at Lucas Oil Stadium and maybe one stadium hot dog that didn't sit so well.
Yeah. Some $12 Bud Lights and a shitty hot dog, but it's all worth it to see the guys. Just seeing them move in person is also, it is a different experience. Like, you can only glean so much from a screen. I think you and I watching the drills portion, like you said, that's where it really like stands out versus like, because on TV, like you're not even seeing all the drills. You're not getting the full picture of what's going on. Seeing the guys running routes or, the running back drills, like it's different. And you get a pretty good sense of like how a player moves and how he looks versus his peers, So it's that alone is maybe my favorite part of being there in person, outside of just the immaculate vibes, of course.
The speed of everything is just kind of different when it's in person. That's why you love watching sports in person. You don't get a real sense of the size and speed of the guys when it's on TV. You know it's a good product, but when you actually get to, see them and you're like, oh my God, like Matthew Golden, hello. And we'll talk about him later, but like these guys are unbelievable. So yeah, ton of fun and glad I went, and hopefully I'll be able to make it back down next year.
Yeah. It's now we're locked in. Now it's like, well, we went together one year. Now we need credentials next year. That's the next step.
I'll apply.
So, yeah. Why not?
The worst I can say is no.
So we are here, obviously, like I said, and like you saw in the episode title, to talk about winners and losers. And if you know anything about Camp Dynasty, you know that we don't exactly love the words winners and losers. And that is because the Combine is only one point in time. It does not necessarily result in these massive pendulum swings of players' evaluations and value in the NFL draft. So to call somebody a winner or a loser is not exactly, doing it justice.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to call, amazing athletes losers. All right. Like, let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah. Guy on podcast says, what's his face is a loser. And it's like, all right, let's not do that. But yeah, it definitely is more of a recap vibe. We'll talk about who we think exceeded expectations and maybe people who fell short of expectations. And I got to say, that list is a lot shorter than the people who exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, overall, a very good showing across the board for the 2025 Dynasty rookies, because, of course, that's what we're talking about here.
If you don't like glaze, you're probably in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
we're going to be sorry. But that's what we're doing today.
Before we get into that portion of it, I do need to refer to what we did last week, which was a RAS draft.
What a disaster. We talked about last week, if you tuned in. Well, we've changed the format every single year, and now we're trying something new, and it was fun, but we're never doing it again.
No, it was fun, but the problem is when you draft 6 players and 4 of them don't actually participate, then you're left with something like we had, which was 3 players versus 2 players, averaging the RAS score across the board. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a disaster. I did win, so I'll take my dub.
Whatever.
With my asterisks, but
big asterisk, bold.
So yeah, expect to see either a 4th format or a return to the glory days next year. But luckily, it doesn't matter what we did last week because we can still talk about this, year's events in the context of exactly what happened on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And before we do that, usually you ask me this question. I'm going to ask you this question now.
Oh boy.
What does this mean to you? Contextualize the conversation we're about to have. What does the combine really mean in the grand scheme of your eval process?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked. The combine is interesting because it's independent of any other variable. Because what we do when we watch tape, there's so many things to take into account. You take into account, running backs, offensive line. You take into account how many defenders are stacked in the box. You take into account for a receiver, their quarterback play, their offensive scheme. We talk about all of these different things. The combine, it's stripped of everything. So you get to just evaluate a player based on how they look in tights. And whether or not you think that's valuable is how much you're going to value the combine in general. And for me, it adds a little bit, but I'm not going to change my entire tune on a player because they had 5 RAS versus a 10 RAS. While it may inform, if guys are really close to each other in my rankings, we're talking if we're grading and they're within a 10th of a point of each other on my grading scale, and then one massively outperforms the other one at a combine, that could be kind of like a tiebreaker, but I'm not going to shift my rankings wholesale because of what happened at the combine. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think tiebreakers, that's a big one because I came into the event this year with a lot of ties. I had a lot of players on the same tier, but also the same grade. So this is going to factor in shuffling the ties. The other thing that I think is really important to remember is the idea that we should never double count the results of the combine. If a player is really fast, if he runs the fastest 40 among his position group, you should not give him a stock boost if you watched him on film and said, that guy's really fast.
Yeah, that's the real thing.
You're just confirming what you've seen. And that's, to me, I think that's the biggest takeaway every year is confirmations. We need to go into the event, look for guys to confirm what we've seen on film. Are you running the time I would expect you to run? Even if it's not super fast. If I like your game, if I like your tape, and you're just running the time, then I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Then I don't care. If it's
how is that different from confirmation bias?
Well, I would say that it's kind of you're getting this objective data that is going with your subjective analysis. So if I watch Trey Harris and I say, man, I don't think he's the best athlete. I don't think he's super fast, but I like how he runs routes. I like this. I like that. And then he comes to Indianapolis and runs a 4.54. I'm not sitting there like, God, that's kind of slow. I'm saying, no, that's exactly the time I would have expected him to run. Therefore, nothing's changing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, that was one of the slower times, so like I got to knock him down. It's like, no,
Right.
That's exactly what it looks like on film. So I've graded you with that context in mind. So
but then
nothing
if
is
Trey
changing.
Harris runs a 4.39,
Exactly.
then you sit here and you're like, okay, what did I miss?
Right.
Right.
And that happened a couple times
It did.
while we were sitting in there like, wait, what was that?
Yeah.
What happened?
Hello.
And then that's when things can really actually change, is when I have an opinion on a player based on film and he does something at the combine that is like so far off of what I was expecting that it's like, I might have missed it. Like I could have missed that. And if I did, I can own it and I can reevaluate the player, but it's never going to just be like, oh, he ran a fast time, bump him up. I'm going to go back to the film. Yep. And I'm going to look for that in the game and be like, okay, yes, I think I did miss that. Or, no, it's not really showing up in his play speed. Yeah, so I don't know how much I need to factor.
He just gets out of the blocks fast. Like, he trained to run the 40.
There was a phrase that we were saying quite a bit, and it kind of became a meme after a while, which is, that's just not his game.
Yeah.
Like somebody would have like a bad time or like something would go wrong in a drill, and it's like, well, that's just not his game. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like I think the one is Jaylen Royals, and he had like 3 straight bad deep ball reps. I'm just like, every single time, I'm like, that's not his game. It's fine. That's not what he's known for. It's all good. It's a little bit of cope, but it's also like, when Nick Nash runs a 4.5 or whatever, it's like, yeah, that's not what he's known for. He's a route runner. He's got good hands. He's good around the sideline. He's not a burner. It's okay.
Yeah. That'll come up a few times. That's not his game. Remember that. We'll talk about that a few times. So we're going to talk winners and losers, but we're going to split the winners in half because we're talking more winners than losers. That's what we're all about. We're here to celebrate the event. We're not here to dunk on people or call them shitty because of what they look like in spandex. So we are going to do the top names that cemented themselves or maybe even raised their stock potentially based on how they performed this week. And then we're also going to talk about the sleeper names. And this is in the context of Dynasty, of course. So these are going to be names that, we've probably talked about already, but these are going to be your guys that are probably more towards the 3rd, 4th round of a rookie draft. And then we'll hit on a couple of losers. And this is really sort of narrative based. So like when we're talking about losers, I think the conversation will be a lot more about like, this is the narrative coming out of Indy. What does that mean? Or why does it even matter? So,
and that's a lot due to the fact that these guys were just really good.
Yes.
Like that was my overall takeaway, was there wasn't a lot of players where I was disappointed coming out and like, yeah, he kind of didn't do what I expected. And while that's not, well, obviously when we get into the losers, I'll talk about it, but there were a couple guys that were like, I wish it would have been better, but there's nobody that I was like flat out disappointed with, like Bucky Irving last year. I think that was a big one for both of us, where we were both like, man, he kind of sucked ass last year, and I think he had like a 2 RAS, and it was like, okay, I think I might be out then because he's also undersized. Like if he's going to be a bad athlete, blah blah blah. So I don't think anybody did that in that kind of way.
Yeah, it did not feel that extreme this year, certainly. Right. And, the other part here, names that you're not going to hear: Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, Tetairoa McMillan, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren. Like none of these guys did anything. And so that's also becoming more of a story every year is, which guys are actually going to perform. And I thought the running back group, it was, outside of Genty, almost everybody, participated almost fully.
Yep.
So that was really, really nice to see. But
it was.
All right. Before we get into winners and losers, this is not more preamble. We are actually going to start talking about players now. Quarterbacks, we don't do winners and losers. It's the combine. Yeah. This doesn't really matter all that much. But narrative-wise, there's always stories coming out of this week, even if it's just what are the insiders saying about the top of the draft class. And in this case, we did not have Cam Ward and we did not have Shedeur Sanders participating in anything on the field. They were just hanging out down there.
Yep.
But
Looked
we
good,
did. Shedeur's chain costs more than.
I think I got a little bit of like damage in my eyes for how much that was like shining off of the Lucas Oil lights.
Yeah, it was a little ridiculous, but the crowd loved him. He is certainly a celebrity figure already.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the buzz coming out of Indy was that it appears, based on what folks are hearing from around the league, that Cam Ward is separating himself as the best quarterback in the class, and that many teams view even a player like Shedeur as a, fringe first round sort of quarterback. So what is your takeaway from hearing that?
I don't know how to feel about Shedeur. Like, I don't want to sit here and make some declaration. I had him, basically tied between QB 1 and 2 with Cam Ward. I like different things about both of them. And the narrative shift about this quarterback class in general has been kind of strange lately. Like, it felt like it was Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and then a gap and then everybody else. And now it seems like the gap is after Ward. And I guess that's probably information that they're getting from, team officials. Like, it's not coming out of nowhere. So maybe that's true. And something we heard was Cam Ward is clearly QB1 and Shedeur's closer to Jackson Dart than he is to Cam Ward. And it's like, I don't feel that way talent wise, but with every other piece that goes into that puzzle, maybe it gets a little complicated for teams.
Yeah, I made the comment last week that I thought there was a bit of a divide forming for me in terms of I just trust the tools that Cam Ward has, even if I'm nervous about his decision making and the turnover problems that we saw. You just trust the guy that has more tools, whereas Shedeur is so game managery. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the big arm. He's not really, creating a ton. He's, falling victim to pressure too often and putting himself in those positions. So it feels like he needs to be in this situation that is, supportive and that he can thrive in an environment that is built to have a quarterback play well. Whereas Cam, I think, could do a little superheroing, and that goes one of two ways, of course. But at the end of the day, I still thought both of them were fringe first round guys. So I think the narrative for me is Shedeur is being viewed in the NFL kind of where I saw him, but that's not far off of where I saw Ward either. And now we're talking about Ward as the first overall pick and right. Shedeur as 28.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm not super far off between Ward and Shedeur on pure tape analysis. And like I said before, they do very different things. And I think that's what do you value as an NFL team? What do you need as an NFL team? But I think it wholly has to do with off the field. Yeah. I think that's where the difference comes in. And if you're a secure organization, I don't think it's that much of a problem. But there are things with teams think he's arrogant and teams probably don't want the Deion Sanders show. And so there are definitely a lot of, outside of between the painted lines that I think NFL teams care a lot about Shedeur. because like the tape, I don't think is that much different than Cam Ward. Not different enough where it's a chasm between those two, but like I said, it goes further than just the pure football evaluation.
Yeah. The Shedur's brand, how much weight is that carrying? Like if it really is like Shedur's going 30, if somebody's trading up and he's going 30, it's like, have we all just considered him a top 5 pick because that's what we've been told by like Dion for the last 2 years? I don't know. Well, outside of those two who didn't do anything, the rest of the class that did actually perform left quite a bit to be desired.
Yeah.
Despite what Ian Rappaport was tweeting, like, can Will Howard sneak into the first round following his great combine performance? And we were both like, wait, what?
Are we at the same combine? Yeah, that was some sickening propaganda that was happening with the reporters. And like, we were sitting there and we'd be like, oh, hey, Quinn Ewers just made a nice throw. And then it's like, oh, and then he followed it up with 2 atrocious ones. And like, that happened with every quarterback, just time and time again. It'd be like, oh, there it is. That's what we've been waiting for. And then it was so inconsistent from all these guys. And I think that's, the kind of indicative of what this class is in general. It's just a bunch of guys that are super inconsistent that are not going to be long-term starters in the league. And the fact that the reporters were shameless enough to take whatever agents were saying and put it out there as fact was pretty shameless. But, you got to do what you got to do to get the paycheck.
Yeah. Will Howard, like, half the crowd was Ohio State fans and half the crowd was Michigan fans. And every time Will Howard touched the football, it was just a cacophony of yelling.
Yeah, cheers and boos.
and he threw like 60% against air. So it was just not great. And Jalen Milroe, not great.
Yep.
Like, very inconsistent. Jackson Dart, pretty inconsistent. Like, it was just all the way around. And I think it's just, we're trying to find guys, Tyler Shuck, Jackson Dart. We're trying to find guys to fill the void. It's just a bad quarterback class, guys.
Yeah,
like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, maybe there's a guy, maybe there's 2 guys. I don't really know that there's anybody else that we need to seriously talk about in this class.
I agree. I think after that, it 100% confirms what you're seeing. I saw Will Howard takes, like you said, where they're like, Will Howard had an incredible day. This is what he does. And it's like, it's not. When we've all seen like a lot of evidence of that. When he's not throwing to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, like, it's pretty okay. And we saw that at Kansas State too. Jackson Dart, it's on and off. Quinn Ewers, it's on and off. Kyle McCord, it's on and off. So let's not try to make somebody a thing. Let's, like, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are shaky enough on their own. We don't need to like throw another guy into this mix. So yeah, I was not impressed with the quarterbacks.
All right. Well, let's talk about some impressive players then. Let's talk about the draw of the 2025 Dynasty rookie class, which is the running back position. And like last year when we did this, it was wide receivers. It was like, take your pick. Like, we could sit here for the next 2 hours and just talk about wide receiver winners. Mm-hmm. I feel like it was the same experience this year with running backs. Like, if you went into the combine with an agenda, if you were like, X is my guy, like, he's gonna shock people, you came away probably right.
Yep.
Because everybody was really good.
Yep. You said it where it was like, what's the answer to this running back class? It's yes. Like, all of these guys are really talented on top of being freak athletes. You saw, I mean, we can get into like some of the guys in general. Like, it was great. But when you talk about winners, like Omarion Hampton, I think in general won the day because he had like just looking at him in person was like, is that a linebacker or is that like an actual? And it was like, oh, it's Omarion Hampton. Yeah, he looks insanely athletic. And then he puts up the numbers with the 4.46 at 221 pounds, 5'11 and a half. And then his jumps were great, 38-inch vertical and a 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump. The shuttle, we're ignoring the shuttle.
Yeah.
Because the shuttle was happening right in front of us. And Omarion Hampton attempted it like 15 times, it felt like. And there was like this synthetic turf or whatever, and everybody was slipping. So he has like a 9.9 RAS, not a 9.6. But yeah, Omarion Hampton impressed me the most.
Yeah, I would say, you could say this probably about like 3 or 4 running backs. Like he's the biggest winner of the event, but I think it's probably Hampton just in the sense of this was already on film, like the second best running back in the class. And I feel like that has become a unanimous sort of thing at this point. Everybody understands this is the second guy. Maybe you have, another player ahead of him, and that's fine because these guys are all great. But I think generally we're talking about Hampton as RB2 in the class. Coming out of Indy now, there is the buzz that like he has locked up first round status. Mm-hmm. And that is because of what he did here with the size and then the, out of this world testing, which now going back to the film, did we expect this? Yes, we did. We expected him to be an absolute freak of nature. Honestly thought he was even faster than I would have said.
Yeah.
Like I would have put him at like about a 4 or 5.
Did you bet us under?
I bet 4.5 or 4.45. I bet the over.
Oh,
and
okay.
I still hit, but by 100th of a second, and that is not what I would have expected. So he was even faster on the track than I would have anticipated him to be. So it was a massive win of a day. I know there's been a lot of conversation about because the class is so deep, will we see a second running back or even a third running back go in round 1? I think Hampton is a strong case for a number of teams at the end of round 1 that are running back needy teams, because there's plenty of those right now. We were talking about that over the weekend. This is a great time for this class to be coming into the league because there are so many spots that are either open or like very average and could easily be upgraded by one of these guys. And I think Hampton, is an upgrade over many, many guys in the league right now.
Well, part of the discussion became, why would you draft Genty at 12 when you can get Hampton at 28? And it's not an invalid argument, but that's just because we didn't get to see Genty. I think that's what a lot of people are missing is like we saw Hampton, and we saw Hampton's a freak and Hampton's tape looks good. So now Hampton's a shiny new toy. Let's not forget who Genty is and what Genty would have put up solid numbers at the combine. There's a reason he didn't perform, and it's because his agent and teams have told him, "Hey, buddy, you're good. You don't need to do this." And there's a reason that Hampton is doing this. So there's levels.
Yep, exactly. And if you wanted to make an argument that Quinshon Judkins was the biggest winner, you also would not be wrong. Because I think with Hampton, it was more of a solidification, like this is the guy. With Judkins, I think he was in this, second tier of the class, maybe that is expansive, that's headed by Hampton. Maybe you call it a third tier even with a player like Judkins. I think he reaffirmed that he is as talented and as freaky as all these other guys. Because I think that was the question we had from coming away from film. We still love it. We still love what we're seeing, but it kind of feels like maybe he's lost a step in terms of the explosiveness that we saw at Ole Miss. And this week he showed he hasn't lost anything in terms of explosiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Judd, I feel like a person who did themselves the most favors in this running back class, and maybe some of the like later round guys that's true of, but I feel like Judkins really kind of announced himself as one of the guys in the top of this class, because it seemed like he was kind of a forgotten, part of the class because it's so deep, and his teammate TreVeyon Henderson has been like climbing the ranks so much, and then there's Omarion and there's Genty, and Kaleb Johnson has been a mainstay at the top of this class. I feel like Judkins was kind of getting left behind, and a performance like this gives him like that little bit of a boost right before the draft, in maybe our eyes, maybe the NFL's eyes, I'm not sure, but like with the tape that he has both at Ole Miss and at Ohio State, plus like testing numbers like this, I feel like it's hard to not talk about him as a guy that's going to go, mid to high second round in the NFL draft. And, you and I entertained maybe sneaking into the end of the first, but there's only so many guys that can go in the first, so I'm not sure. But I was really impressed with how he looked at the combine.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if his name was called in round 1 this year, you'd be like, what?
Like, no way. Hell yeah.
But I feel like this performance makes that a possibility. True. Like the possibility of having that shocking Judkins first round pick moment is in the cards because of what he did, and what he did at 221 pounds. Yeah. That's the other side of this, where he's listed at 219. Kind of looked like maybe he was closer to 215.
Yeah.
And to see him come in at 221 and still put up the 11-foot broad and the 38.5 vert and the 4.48 40.
The 4.48 was because, like, we talk about Hampton as like a guy that can get going and break away as a big guy. Same weight, 0.02 of a second difference in 40.
Yep.
Like that really impressed. I figured he'd be more towards like the 4.5, low 4.5s for Judkins.
Yep, same here. So, how about his partner in crime, TreVeyon Henderson, who you selected in the RAS draft because we both expected and everybody expected him to be a freaky athlete, because that is the calling card when you watch TreVeyon. That's why he has so many fans. The explosiveness and the speed. It all showed up here as well. He did, everything he needed to do to cement his name in this tier of guys as well.
Yeah, I picked him because I was like, man, the acceleration is what matters so much in the 40. Like that's the big thing. And then, the explosiveness contributes to your jumps with your vertical and your broad, and he did great on all that. Like the only red on his sheet is with his height and his weight, because everything else was so good. And now I'm looking back at this, and like the 4.43, like makes me think about Omarion Hampton's like 4.46 is so insane. Right. But TreVeyon flying, and then he didn't do many of the running back drills later on. He kind of tapped out, but he was looking pretty crisp in the ones that he did. But yeah, both of these Ohio State guys, they are building a case of why they belong where they have been.
It's going to be really interesting where I end up ranking these two, because when we did running backs 2.0, I had the same grade on both of them, gave the tiebreaker to Judkins. And by the time we got to pre-combine, I had given the tiebreaker to Henderson because of his performance down the stretch in the playoff.
Yep.
And now, after seeing the results here, I'm almost like,
swing it back.
They're both really good, but that's pretty shocking stuff from Judkins to prove he's got that still on the resume. So yeah, this is a fun little battle. And like you said before, the answer is yes. Yep. It doesn't matter. But So this is maybe a little controversial.
Yep.
Because I've seen this player labeled as a loser by others, but I am going to choose to label him as a winner, and that is Cam Skattebo. Because the reason why you might say he is a loser is because all these guys did the thing. You know, we're talking about 9.3, 4, 5, 6 RAS with all these top backs. And Skattebo didn't run a 40. He didn't do the drills. But what he did do were the jumps. And how he performed in the jumps was pretty shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not. The word I don't think is shocking. Because I think what you see with Skattebo, and the thing, you know, this is more of a player that's going to have guys. Like some guys are going to pound the table for Cam Skattebo, whereas others are like, yeah, he's fine, but he's like later. He's not in this tier of guys that we're talking about right now. And that's where I have him. I have him in this Judkins Henderson conversation. And part of that is because you see the short area explosiveness and acceleration on his film. You don't see breakaway speed at all. It's a major like weakness, if you want to call it that, of his game, is that when he gets through the second level, he's going to sputter out pretty quickly. But what he can do in that short area is what makes him what I think is a very high-end running back talent. And that showed up with incredibly impressive jumps. I believe the second or third highest vertical among testing running backs in this class. So I am going to choose to say that he is a winner here for going out and doing something and doing it at an extremely high level and proving that he belongs in this conversation.
Yeah, Skattebo is interesting because, like, I feel like people feel one way or the other about him. I don't think anybody's kind of like, yeah, Cam is fine. I feel like you either think he's, you know, up there in that like third tier, or you just kind of disregard him as a player. Like, yeah, whatever. It's, you know, a bunch of production, doesn't really mean anything. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I feel like these numbers don't mean a ton because, like you said, this is kind of like his game. This explosiveness that he has to get like in and out of jams around defenders is absolutely there, but then the speed isn't there. And so, like, you don't run the 40 because you probably are going to run like low 4.5s, maybe like around 4.6, and then you like jump really well. Like, I'd have tapped out too if I jumped 40-inch vertical. Like, I'd have been like, hey, I'm good. Like, that's awesome. So I wish, like, I don't know why these guys that are like, you know, maybe second, third rounders aren't doing the drills. Like, I don't understand that. And that we had a lot of conversation about that while we were there. Like, yeah, why is this guy not, you know, running routes, or why is this guy not participating in these running back drills? I feel like he could have done really well and like impressed maybe a GM, but unfortunately we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him.
The one thing I would think about there is, like, if he is going to run a 4.6,
yeah,
which is totally in the cards,
absolutely,
for him, like, pulling out is a way to like keep that negative conversation out of the media. Like, hey, look at my jumps, I did great. If he has great jumps but also runs a 4.6, people are only going to talk about the 4.6.
That's true.
And so I feel like it's, you know, maybe in his best interest to be like, all right, I'm just gonna, you know, we'll get to the pro day. Maybe he'll run at the pro day, maybe he won't.
He'll run a 4.55 at the pro day.
Yeah, that's but at the end of the day, if you watch the film and if you have an opinion based on the film, you don't care what his 40 is, because he's not, right. It's not his game. That's not his game.
There you go.
All right. So that's kind of the top end. And I put Skattebo there because that's where I have him. I know prominent draft media personalities I've seen label him as a day 3 sort of running back. I get it. It's not where I am with him. I think you're somewhere in the middle with him potentially, like you said.
Like early 3rd, I'd say.
But sleeper winners. These are players that are probably, not going to be in the prominent running back conversation in terms of the top backs in the class. And part of the reason for that is because of how deep the class is. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to even call some of these guys sleepers because like last year, these are all like top 5 guys or damn near. But the number one sleeper winner is a player that we expected to be the sleeper winner, and he was, and that was Bhayshul Tuten.
Yep.
Because Tuten did, in fact, run that low 4.3 time that we talked about last week, and it was awesome because his first time was like 4.38.
It was like 4.38 or 4.39. It was like, what did you say? Do you remember what you said?
I was like, I think he can get this down to a 4.33.
Yeah.
And it was like 0.06, but I was like, I think he can get down there. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, there it is.
It was honestly a crazy moment because everybody had like, there wasn't a ton of people that improved a ton from their first time to their second time. It was pretty much like within 100th of a second. And then it was like Tuten ran the 4.3, 8 or 9. And you said that, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like maybe he'll get it to a 4.37. And then he did it. He did the thing. And the place also went crazy when he did it.
Yeah. The crowd was very excited about all of the like low 4.3 numbers. It was a good crowd for that. But yeah, I mean, I thought Tuten's speed, like we talked about this last week, exactly mirror image of last year's sleeper winner, which was Isaac Guerendo, with the 4.33, in this case, a 4.32 speed running back that's showing you legitimate skill on film. Like we came out of the combine last year and I went back and watched Guerendo and I was like, this is like an actually good player. Like this is a actually good running back. That's how I felt about Tuten when I watched him leading up to the combine. I was like, he's going to be like right now, I think he's RB12 for me in the class. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he could literally have a role next year. Like right. I wouldn't be shocked if Bhayshul Tuten had an NFL like fantasy relevant moment next season. And so this was, obviously the moment that, we expected, but he delivered.
Yeah, and also the jumps were insane for Tuten. He had a 40.5 vertical and then a 10'10" broad jump. So it kind of accentuates that. He also had a bad short shuttle. Again, disregard all the short shuttle times.
Yeah.
Just pretend they don't exist. The field was bad. The spot they were doing it was terrible. Everybody was slipping. So, but yeah, he is definitely going to contribute to a team. He's going to hit, one of those home run balls where I don't know what Shanahan team he's going to end up on. We've talked about the Dolphins or the Vikings or the Niners or whoever, but he's going to carve out a role one way or another because that speed is hard to, you can't really teach speed like that.
So we expected it with Tuten. I can't say I expected it with the next player, despite the fact that I loved his tape. When we talked running backs 2.0, my number 8 running back in the class was DJ Giddens. And I'm pretty sure if you go back and listen to that episode, you will hear me say his big limitation is his athleticism. Mm-hmm. He is not a great athlete. And then he showed up to Indy and was one of the most athletic running backs at the entire event. He ended up with the RAS was 9.78.
Third highest out of all the running backs.
Like this, and this is one of those where I'm like, I definitely need to go back and rewatch the film because I loved it. I loved the creativity. I loved how he worked, through traffic. I loved how deep his bag was in terms of making guys miss, getting off of that first defender. If he's, he's showing me that he's got 4.43 speed to boot with that, plus the explosiveness showing up in the jumps. I mean, Giddens is going from like, I thought this was going to be kind of my like, I'm going to sink with this ship thing. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to put him at 8 and he's probably going to do nothing, to like, goddamn, this guy might start rising for everybody.
Yeah, Giddens is a player that I definitely need to take another hard look at. And I think that's part of the combine process is some of these players that maybe you didn't like give enough attention to because you had some preconceived notions about them, like I did with Giddens. I was like, this just isn't my kind of player. And then, he comes out to the combine and has like juice like this, and he has solid tape. It's like, well, maybe I got to revisit him with more of an open mind rather than maybe coming in and being like, yeah, whatever, I got to get through DJ Giddens' film.
That is very real.
Yeah.
When you're watching a lot of guys and you're watching somebody that you're not expecting is going to blow you away, you're a human being. You can let that infiltrate your process. So.
But yeah, I'll be honest with everybody.
Yeah.
But we watch a lot of guys, man.
Anybody who listens to Camp Dynasty knows you're never going to hear excuses or, no, I definitely knew. We're going to be as transparent as possible all the time.
Yeah.
So the next guy is kind of a weird one because when you look pure RAS, you're not going to see a number that blows you away. And a bit of that has to do with the size, and that factored in. And I thought his testing was fine, but again, it's like all these guys.
It's just the jumps that were like whatever.
All these guys have 9s, and this guy had a 7.7.
And it's because he decided to bench, and nobody else decided to bench. It's like whatever. Who cares how much my running back benches?
And that player's Trevor Etienne, who is having a very nice draft process. Came in to Senior Bowl week, watching his film and being like, God damn, this guy's got some juice. He's got some talent. The production is not there. I don't know why. It seems like he's been a little bit inconsistent throughout his college career, and that's, there's a reason for that usually. However, he looked great at the Senior Bowl, and you and I, specifically in the drills portion, it was like every time somebody made a great play or had a great rep in the drills, it was like, who was that? Oh, it was Trevor Etienne.
Yeah. It's you're sitting far enough away and, they're all wearing the same thing. They're all wearing like weird numbers. You got the sheet. And so we'd be like, oh, who is that again? You go down and be like 37. Be like, oh, it was Etienne again. And it was like, it happened like 6 times in a row that he did a drill where it just felt like he had so much more burst than like the other guys in the drills. And I don't know if maybe he was going just harder than everybody, or if that kind of pop and sizzle shows up on tape where he does have that, get in and out of his jukes, break some ankles and, find the hole and go. I think he has all of that, and it was absolutely on display. Like the 7.39 RAS is going to look ugly and it's going to be yellow, but like the 40, the 20, and the 10-yard split were awesome. And the only reason it's getting pulled down is because he decided to do more stuff. And I don't think he should really be knocked for that because he decided to do the bench and only put up 15 reps. It's like, who gives a shit? And then, if you strip all that away, and it's like just a vertical and broad jump, he's probably looking at an 8 something and it's green. So I think a few things can, make when you're just scrolling Twitter and it's like, Etienne, whatever, and keep scrolling. I think it could have been better if he did less, and I'm happy he did more.
So I have a take forming.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure I'm not insane. So I went to Mock Draftable, and the profile is very, very similar. So I'm going to lock this take in.
Travis Etienne.
No, but another running back with an older brother in the NFL that also played at Georgia.
I go to say it. I'm not. Don't make me guess. Don't put me on the spot.
James Cook.
Oh, right.
I feel like he is James Cook and he is in the same sense of you go into draft season seeing the size, seeing the production numbers, and being like, I like him, but like, what's his role going to be in the NFL? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, what can we really expect here? And then, James Cook is a starting running back and he's getting like a legitimate workload and he's super fantasy relevant. So that's the kind of guy we're talking about here. I think that is the embodiment of this draft class is like, instead of in that year when Cook was like RB 4 or 5 or whatever it ended up being in the class, this is going to be like your RB 10.
Right.
And I feel like the profile is very, very similar to a point where I might just make it a straight up comp.
I like it. I think Etienne was kind of bad at Florida, and then you put him behind like a competent O-line, and he looks pretty solid. And I think that is the story for a lot of guys down the road. But it's nice to see that he's getting a little more attention and maybe buried in a good running back class, but the champagne problems.
Yeah, that's okay. Speaking of backs that are talented pass catchers, because that's Etienne really showed up in the pass drills for the running backs. The route running was very good, and that carried over from the Senior Bowl. RJ Harvey, I thought, also looked very good in the pass drills and also tested very well. Undersized again, but a player that was one of the most productive backs in the country last year at Central Florida. Sort of a weird like evaluation because of the size, but he showed you the athleticism is there and the pass catching skill is there. So another player here that is going to be way later in the class, I think, for most people. You might have RG Harvey Hive, and that's fine. But maybe like your RB 15 in this sort of a class, and he's one of the sleeper winners of the combine.
Yeah, Harvey was really impressive. Again, another guy whose RAS score suffered because he did more stuff. The fraudulent short shuttle was bad, and the bench was also not very good. Outside of that, he was exceptional across the board. The jumps were really good, and the drills, he looked phenomenal. Especially, like you said, the pass catching drills, he just looked really smooth, really natural. We talked about him, 5'8", 205, a guy that is kind of like a throwback to the third down back before football evolved and all your running backs need to be able to catch passes. Back when you had, your runner and your pass catcher as backs, RJ Harvey feels like kind of one of those throwback, Darren Sproles or JD McKissick kind of guys, those Duke Johnson. We were kind of throwing names out, and feels like one of those guys that can come in and really get you a couple catches and have a little bit of juice out there, and not a bad running back, but just feels like one of those guys.
Yep. And we're talking about pass catching backs.
The pass catching back is up next.
Your guy.
I'm so in.
you discovered that he's your guy.
I fell in love with Woody Marks at the combine. I was like, make this guy a goddamn slot receiver and like build an offense around him, because another one where it's similar to Etienne, where every single time he would do one of the pass catching reps, it was like, oh my God, who is that? Like, that looks like a receiver doing these drills because the running backs, they'd look good. And then Woody Marks would do the same thing. And it's like, oh, everybody else looks like they're running through quicksand. Like, oh my God, he's unbelievable. So Woody Marks, fun player out of USC, somebody we haven't talked about at all, I don't think. But definitely was a blast to see him just tearing it up in the combine drills.
Yeah, a little bit of background on Woody Marks, just because we haven't talked about him. He was a fifth-year player, 4 years at Mississippi State, and transferred to USC this year. He had 1,100 yards rushing this year, which was a career best for him, 9 touchdowns at USC. Easily career best in that department, because most of his work in college, and especially in the first 2 years, which I believe were under Mike Leach at Mississippi State, was as a pass catcher. He's got 257 career receptions as a running back.
That's insane.
He had 78 in 2021 alone on 92 targets, 1,500 career receiving yards for Marks. I think the stat I heard at the Senior Bowl was that is more than like all but 2 receivers in this entire draft class or something. Like, so it was some insane stat that was like putting into context how much receiving work Marks has had over a 5-year college career. So that showed up. It definitely, it's no fluke. He looked proficient as a route runner.
Yeah, he was carving it up. Definitely going to be a guy just to keep an eye on his career. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a fantasy relevant guy or whatever, but he definitely like just one of those easy to root for players, I think.
Could see him being one of those guys that's like relevant, like on the fringes for a while, like the JD McKissick, like that's just like
the deep league roster guys that you can throw in when it's week 12 and all your guys are hurt and you're in bipocalypse. It's like, I'll throw Woody Marks in there.
Yeah,
he can give 4 catches, maybe score,
because he'll be on a team. I mean, he's gonna have a job. So
absolutely.
All right, that's the fun stuff, and that's a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah,
we had a lot of running backs.
It's like almost an hour in. And it's like, it's the running backs. There you go.
I promise it won't all be that much, but wide receiver or no. Losers. We're not done with running backs.
No, we're not.
Jesus. All right. So the number one player here that I'm going to call a loser, and this is relative, because I don't think anybody was like bad, like you said earlier. But I think Ollie Gordon is the player that is getting left behind when we talk about where we were preseason to where we were on 2.0 to where we are now after seeing all of the players competing together at the combine. It felt like Gordon was easily a notch below some of the other guys in this class.
Yeah, 100% agree. I feel like what we saw on tape was vindicated in the combine. The footwork was a little messy. The getting up to speed wasn't there. The kind of shiftiness wasn't, and that's like all the stuff that's really put on display, and it's kind of all of Ollie Gordon's biggest weaknesses. And so like this was not the place for him, because Ollie Gordon is a really like talented back and he can do a lot of really good things, but I just don't think any of them come on display in a setting like this.
Yeah, that's really fair. You know, like I'm not coming away from this being like, oh, he's, trash and throw him behind all these other guys that tested well. This was not the event that he was going to shine. And I think that was, a lot of people, I think, had an idea of this player because of the sorts of things that he did 2 years ago. And even when we were both lower on him, you even lower than I was on 2.0. And like, somebody is in the comments like, what are you talking about, man? This guy just had 1,700 yards rushing. Like, it's like
I've looked at box scores before too, buddy.
It's things like this where it was like the criticisms that we had, and specifically, talking about that initial foot speed and comparing him even all the way to the summer. I said, I think there's a little bit of Audric Estime here.
And I called you out for that.
You did. That was as close to an argument as we've ever had, I think.
And I think that it was a pretty salient point looking back at it.
Like, that showed up in his 40 time. It is that initial foot speed, the build-up time. It's not there. The 10-yard split's bad, and then he ends up running a 4.61. And you might have watched him 2 years ago as a breakaway runner that's, got whatever it was, some absurd amount of 15-plus yard runs at this size. And you would have been like, oh, my God, a player like this has that kind of speed? Are you serious? Mm-hmm. And it's like, he ran a 4.61 because of that exact reason. It's not that he's a slow player. It's that he needs to build up to that speed. And that is something that is not a consistent thing that's going to happen for running backs. So that's kind of, we contextualize the performance of being like, this is exactly what we saw on film with Ollie Gordon. And that's why he's a notch below some of these other backs in the class. The other names. So let's talk about Kaleb Johnson.
Yeah.
let's just do that.
Combine loser, Kaleb Johnson. I'll start so you can have a second. So Kaleb Johnson had a pretty good day, I'd say in general, and we're coming away with a Kaleb Johnson loser take because it seems like that's the vibe around Kaleb Johnson after the combine. But in all reality, like, Kaleb Johnson had a solid day and he looked awesome in the drills. I think that's going to go, unnoticed. But it's the 4.57. We're at a 4.57 40, and it's like, oh, well, all these other guys, we've talked about them. Omarion Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson. And then you have Genty. Like, all these guys ran. And then you have Ashton Genty, and they all ran like blazing 40s. And then you have Kaleb Johnson, who goes out and, does the thing, and it's like, oh, 4.57, Kaleb Johnson's slow. It's over. Like, everybody else separated themselves from this guy. And I'm not there. I know you're not there. But it just feels like maybe consensus is leaving Kaleb Johnson by the wayside because he ran slow. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what we saw on tape. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about this whole time. But Johnson was never the blazing breakaway, like, I'm going to break through the first line and nobody's going to catch me. I'm going to break your safety's angle. Like, that's not who Johnson was. And the 40 confirms that, shows that, but it shouldn't have surprised anybody into moving him down their board.
Yeah. Like, he's a loser in the sense that he was outperformed by a lot of the other backs that are in the same conversation as he is in the draft class. He's not a loser in the sense that this performance is making me rethink my evaluation of Kaleb Johnson. Like, Kyle Krabs is the one that said this the best, which is that, did you watch Kaleb Johnson film and ever see him break the angle of a safety? Like, right. Did you ever see that happen? And if you didn't, which you probably didn't because it didn't happen, maybe at all, why would you expect him to run a fast time?
Right.
Like, it's just not how he plays running back. And we do this every single year with this type of runner where they run a mid 4.5s time. And 4.57 is a tick slow. It's a tick slow. I'd like that number to be closer to 4.54. That's where I would have expected him to be. But at the same time, we're talking hundredths of a second.
Yeah, we're talking about 300ths of a second.
It doesn't matter. It really does not matter to me at all. Like, I won't put any emphasis into this at all. He will not, his grade for me will not change. It will be, you said it. We watched him in the drills. He looked like Kaleb Johnson. He looked like that smooth, fluid, between the tackles beast that's, coming in at 6'1", 224. Yep. That's why we're talking about him going to New England and being like 2 pegs below a Derrick Henry for Mike Vrabel in New England. So
yeah, if you are moving Kaleb Johnson down, you're very much I'm going to skim the box scores and argue with people who watch the game kind of person. Like I just watch some tape. It's going to be okay. Like this is Kaleb Johnson's whole thing is I'm not like a Blazer, but I'm really good at football and I can do all the things.
That's my son you're talking about. Don't you ever talk about him like that. We don't have to dwell on this one because I kind of threw this name in haphazardly, but I do think Dylan Sampson would be classified as a loser in the sense that I expected him to be one of the fastest running backs among the entire position group, and he chose not to run a 40. Yep. So if I'm expecting you to run like mid 4.3s, which I thought would have been totally reasonable for Sampson, and you opt not to run it, like that kind of tells me something is not right with that. So
you got to have if you're not going to run the 40 and everybody expects you to run the 40, you got to have an excuse.
Right.
Like it's got to be my hamstring just wasn't really feeling right. And like then it's like, all right, cool, sounds good. Like we're not going to. But if you're just like supposed to be one of the fastest players in the class and you don't run, then you might start to think one way about the player. And there's another guy that was supposed to be one of the fastest players in the class and did run and didn't run great. And I feel like the conversation would be a little different, if it was like Dylan Sampson. It was like, we think this guy's really fast, but he didn't run. So who knows? So, but if Dylan Sampson would have came out and ran like a 4.45, I feel like the tune would be different negatively. So maybe he's just protecting himself a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, because I'm lower on him, and he's got a lot of fans. I've seen the name up in RB5 sort of conversation in the class. I'm lower on him. You're supposed to run a 4.38. Like you're supposed to do that to be like, this is what I do. This is why people love me. And now I'm like, I feel comfortable with where I have him ranked in the class if he's not willing to put that, number out there.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about wide receivers. That's a lot of running back talk. I hope.
Hey, that's what the class is.
That's what
we're
it is.
Here for.
Yeah, we did the same thing with wide receivers last year.
There's timestamps. Like if you're sick of hearing about it, you can just go to the wide receivers.
Yeah. If you don't want to listen to 2 hours of combine recap, like jump around, man. We got it all. It's all in the description. We got the little fun titles and
come back tomorrow. It's all good.
Yeah.
Put us on 2x.
God damn it, man. It's draft season. This is what we're here to do. Wide receivers, obviously, the conversation begins with Matthew Golden.
Yeah.
Because I think overall, all position groups, the most shocking moment for me was when Golden put up a 4.30 on the first run. I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not what I saw on film. I saw a player that was really fast, but I didn't see this. And what ended up being a 4.29.
Yeah, that was, we kind of just sat there. And so funny thing about attending the combine in person is you don't hear anything. You don't see any of the times. Like you need to have a headphone in connected to an app on your phone in order to hear anything. But it also turns your phone into a superheater and drains your battery. And so like neither of us were listening. We were just watching. And so we had to wait until the second round because then they put like the little lower third where they showed you their first time and then their second time they timed it. And it was like 4.30 for Golden. And we were like, hold up. Like he looked fast, but holy shit. And then we just kind of sat there for a minute. Like, I can't believe he ran a 4.29, like, or 4.30. And then, like you said, it comes out with the 4.29. It was the, like, shocking, awesome moment for Golden. Unfortunately, didn't get like the crowd pop like Bhayshul Tuten's 4.32 did, because it was on his first run and not everybody knew. But it was a really impressive, and it kind of makes you rethink the player. We talked about this a lot. It was the main conversation where it's like, you thought that Bond was the speedster out of the two, and he runs like 0.15 faster than Bond, and it's like, shit, like I got to go back to the tape and see what I was missing with Golden, because I thought he was like a nice route runner that had acceleration, and like he was pretty solid. He was around my wide receiver 5 or 6, but I didn't see this kind of speed on tape. And now we know he has that kind of speed. Does he translate it into game speed? That's what I'll be interested going back in and see if he's got it like that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. This is the perfect example of a time where you just need to go back, because we saw him very similarly. We had him in the same spot, in wide receiver 6-ish sort of spot. When I see a time like this, where I'm expecting him to run like flip-flop Bond and Golden, that's what I was expecting. I was expecting low 4.4s for Golden, and I was expecting this ridiculous like high 4.2 time for Bond. When Golden puts that time up, I'm like, all right, I got to go back. I got to look for it on film. But more importantly than that, I think, is reminding yourself not to overreact to this number.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's equally important that you acknowledge, like, okay, I think he's obviously faster than I thought he was, because he put up the fastest time amongst all of the receivers in the class. And that should matter if you didn't think he was that fast. But also, just because he's the fastest wide receiver in the class doesn't mean he should like automatically be wide receiver 2.
Yep. Or wide receiver 1.
Or wide receiver 1.
Because that was the immediate NFL post.
Yes.
Is Matthew Golden the wide receiver 1? I know you're trying to get people to tune into the combine. I respect it. Shameless plug. But you can't, like, Teteroa, again, it's a guy that wasn't there. And there's a reason he wasn't there. He's still the wide receiver 1. If you want Golden to be your wide receiver 2 because of, like, you dedicated time to watching the tape and you have a strong feeling about that, and this pushed him up over the edge, I respect that. But don't just be like, this guy fast, runs good routes, wide receiver 2. I think that there's still guys that are more talented, even though this is a weaker wide receiver class. But I will also be diving back into the tape to see, if this translates.
And I say that as much to like remind myself. I'm not sitting here like saying like, don't you dare put him at like, it's one of those things where it is very hard when you see a time like this and you're like, I liked his film. Like, I didn't think he was a bad player. It's hard to see a time and be like, kind of want to move him all the way. You have that sense of like momentum and like, man, he did something like really crazy. You have to remind yourself that like what you're seeing on film is really what you should listen to. So that'll be a fun one. And we'll cover that next week when we do a mock draft.
Yeah, we
teaser
will.
There. So we'll talk about Matthew Golden at that point. Other wide receiver winners, Golden, obviously far and away, I think the biggest winner, maybe, of all position groups, just in the sense of how wide open the wide receiver class is. But I'm going to call Luther Burden a winner. And I know
Burden is a winner.
Yeah. And I know you're going to call him a winner too. I have seen him called a loser.
I saw that too.
But we are in agreement here that he was a winner of this event. Why?
Because he looked fucking good. I think that's all that really matters. Like, he came out, he had a really good 40 time because, again, speed is not his game. That's not what we know Luther Burden for. He's a solid route runner and one of the best run after catch guys that we've seen in a while. That is the big and the small on him. He's 6 foot 206, so solid size for a player like him. The hand size is small, but he doesn't have a drop problem, so I don't care. And then like the gauntlet, he was perfect. The drills, like somebody said he was going 80%. I didn't see that. I thought that he also looked great in the drills. So all across the board, I think he was solid to good to great. And so if that's not a winner, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think the reason I think, outside of what you just said, which is that overall great day, I think he's a winner in the sense that the name has started to like fall out of favor almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're seeing like Jeremiah's got him like 33rd, and
right.
like we're not talking about him in that he's closer to second round than he is top 10 at this point. And I think you and I have always been somewhere in the middle with Burden.
Yeah. High teens,
yeah.
mid 20s, somewhere in that range. Like the JSN, Quinshon Judkins, Zay Flowers, that kind of range.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And that's been pretty consistent throughout the entire process. I think what Saturday showed me is that he looks a notch above most of these other guys. Like the way he was moving in the drills just looked a little different than most of these guys. And it was Brett Coleman who is on the field. And I'm not going to say that he's a liar because he's literally standing on the field, but he was like, it looked like Burden was going 80%. And you and I consistently, in the same fashion as Etienne, like something would happen, like a route would happen, and we'd be like, who the hell was that? It's Burden. That happened like every single time. He was clearly operating differently. So if he was going 80%, then he was doing better than almost every other receiver at 80%. So,
yeah, I agree. If he was going 80%, then move him up.
Yeah,
because you look damn good at 80%.
The other two, I'll lump these two together.
As
the
they
Cyclones
will be throughout.
Yes, our Cyclones. I tweeted it. I'm going to be pushing a lot of Cyclones propaganda on the pod.
Get an Iowa State shirt.
I'm very tempted because Jayden Higgins and Jaylin Noel, both just
Jaylin Noel.
Jaylin Noel. I'm going to get this right at some point.
You had it right to start, and you psyched yourself out.
I know. I keep defaulting, and I'll get there. But the point is that they were both excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start with Higgins specifically because I do think that Higgins was a bigger winner in the sense of like, we were just curious. We weren't doubting. We weren't like, I don't think he's that great of an athlete. We were genuinely curious. Like, how is he going to test? Because he looks athletic, but you don't really see it turning into like vertical speed. So like, what is this going to look like? And I think he blew expectations out of the water.
Yeah. He, for me, if there was a biggest winner in the wide receiver group, it's Jayden Higgins, because the size, 6'4", 215, 39-inch vertical, 10'8" broad jump, all incredibly impressive. And then running the 4.47, we were expecting. I didn't know exactly what to expect. I don't know if you did, but like I was probably sitting more 4.5, a little higher than 4.5. Just because like guys this big don't run that fast, and like he doesn't seem like a burner on tape either. It seems more like a big slot that can break some tackles and a physical wide receiver. And then he comes out and runs a 4.47, so closer to 4.45 than mid 4.5s. And and then the drills, he was also like wildly impressive. And the gauntlet, he ran a perfect gauntlet also, where doesn't break stride, doesn't like deviate off of the line at all. Just top to bottom, really, really, really impressive day, where I think if anybody stocked up a lot, it felt like Jayden Higgins was that kind of guy.
Yeah, legitimate 6'4", 214 size with, the bright green athleticism, 9.85. I think for me, one thing that's important is to also say he ran a 4.47. I still think he works best as a power slot. Like, this is not something where it's like, oh my God, he ran a 4.47. Like, let's stick him outside and let him run like 9 routes. Like, I still think, because first of all, you have a 1.58 10-yard split. That kind of checks out, where it's like he's not starting super fast. He gets there and it ends up being an incredible 40, but he's not this like quick twitch accelerator. And all of those passing drills, his best reps were short. His size and fluidity show up most in those short routes. And when he's running deep, like we saw, on the go ball and on the corner route, it looks a little bit less polished and a little bit less impressive. So I'm very excited that he put up these numbers. I think he's top of round 2. Like, maybe you're thinking about late round.
Yeah.
But
absolute ceiling was like, maybe he sneaks into the first.
Yeah.
But he does feel like that upper quarter of the second round is where he's going to end up.
Yep, exactly. And I do think it is still, in my opinion, more of a, he is more of that slot, the versatile slot option. Like, he play inside outside, but most of his work in the slot.
Yeah, we talked about him being potentially like a Jags target because the Jags want to work Brian Thomas into the slot a little more, and Higgins can play both. And I think that's the most impressive part. I'd like to see, I'll say, him play like 65-35, like slot to outside.
Yep.
So majority of his stuff is coming inside. And then he can, run on the outside for sure. But I just don't prefer him getting the majority of his work out there.
And on the Noel side, I think it was a little bit more of like just confirming what we saw on film, which is that he's just a freaking crazy athlete, like insane deep threat sort of player. The jumps for Noel specifically were insane. And I think that goes into how easily he separates deep. This is the player that's like quick twitch. He's got the 1.51 10-yard split with the 11-2 broad. Like, he is going to get deep quick. And I mean, he did get into the 4.3s. I think first attempt was 4.4s. And we were like, I think this could be faster. Got into the 4.3s. Undersized, of course, 5'10", 194. I mean, undersized, but not like...
That's not small.
Right, exactly. So for me, talking about Noel around the Senior Bowl time, being like, I'm pretty sure this is like a rock solid, like day 2 sort of player for me, grade-wise. And I think based off of the buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl, coupled with the 9.71 RAS and kind of stealing the show in the drills and everything else, I think he's a second-round pick.
Yeah, I think he could definitely pop in late second round. He's the type of guy that every team wants to have, the kind of, long, fast, varied receiver that can, because like Noel can do a lot of different things just like Higgins can. I think that's what's so interesting about these two players and why they're going to be intertwined. Obviously they were teammates, but they also are both like just really solid all around kind of players.
Complement each other really well too.
Yeah. How about a team just double up and take them both?
Yeah.
Keep them both on the same team. Maybe let Noel fall to the third, so then a team can take Higgins at the top of the second and Noel at the top of the third. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have this guy on my team, like a guy that can separate early and win deep. Like, I'm all in. seems like, 41.5 and 11-foot broad jump is nuts.
Insane. Sleeper winners, a little bit different level than we're talking about with running backs, where the sleepers are like the good players. In this case, these are legitimate sleepers. And I did go back and watch both of them, at least, as much as I could on these guys. Jaylin Lane from Virginia Tech and Isaac TeSlaa from Arkansas. These were the two sleepers that I thought really kind of stood out from the pack. And what was hilarious about this is that both of their families were in attendance. Obviously, like so many guys, you hear like pockets of the crowd cheering when they do stuff. It's because all of their families are there watching them. These two in particular had like the two loudest families in attendance. It got them like on the screen. Colleen Wolf's like shouting them out. And it just so happened that I think they were both the best, like, of the, sleeper tier of receivers in the class, testing well, looking good across the board. TeSlaa had maybe the best catch we saw, period, among all of the receivers. It was good stuff.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun to see the families, and like TeSlaa's family was sitting right next to us at one point, and we didn't really realize it. We just like heard them erupt at one point. We're like, well, when did they get here? And it was like every time TeSlaa would do anything, and he had that one catch, and it was, they were going crazy. I couldn't help but to go crazy. I was like, oh my God. So yeah, and then Jaylin Lane had also like a really good day. He was so fast. You could tell there was a little bit of a difference between him and all the other guys. Ran a 4.34 and then had also incredible jumps, 40-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. And he's, a half inch away from, he's 5'10" on Tinder, 191 pounds. So we're in business definitely with Jaylin Lane. I'm sure there's going to be a hive forming for him.
Yeah, from what I saw in film, Lane, little more gadgety. Like he's going to be your sort of like day 3, like gimmick receiver, but like with this sort of athleticism, like is a legitimate option as like your 4th guy that you're going to scheme touches to. They did that a lot at Virginia Tech, a lot of motion with Lane. TeSlaa. I think TeSlaa might actually have something. Like
I don't disagree.
Watch and admittedly here, there is no all 22 for TeSlaa. There was for Lane. So I was surprised by that. I was glad to see it, but there's nothing for TeSlaa. So I'm working off of the YouTube stuff. It's a little bit of highlight reel. So this is not a real eval. This is not a real analysis, but based on what I saw in the field and based on what I saw on a little bit of action from this last season, he might be one of my like favorite sleeper guys in the wide receiver group. He's a D2 wide receiver, 2 years in D2, transferred to Arkansas, never had a big season in terms of production this year. Career high at the D1 level of 532 yards, 3 touchdowns on 28 catches, only 36 targets. But he does not have a drop in 2 years in D1. And he is 13 for 24 in contested catches, 54% across 2 seasons in D1. 5 yards after the catch per reception.
What's his yards per route run?
Yards per route run overall is 1.45, but this year 1.98.
Okay.
Like the stats are good. The catch, what I've seen from him at the catch point, like at the Senior Bowl, I think even he had a good catch, and then like having the best catch at the combine, coupled with the fact that like over 2 years he hasn't dropped a pass and is like really good in contested spots. I'm going to assume he's really good at the catch point. He's got great hands. So, and to see him be, 6'4" and
214,
214, 997 RAS, 4.4340, matching Jalen Lane's 151 10-yard, plus the big jumps, plus he did the short stuff and greened that too. Good. I mean, I'm just saying, maybe a name to watch on day 3 of the draft this year. If your team gets Isaac TeSlaa, maybe get a little excited about it.
2 A's in TeSlaa. Don't forget it.
Yeah.
Not Nikola Tesla.
No.
Not like the car.
And there's a fancy little capital S in there too. It's very avant-garde.
It's going to be an interesting jersey to pull out at the frat parties.
Yeah. All right. Wide receiver losers. 2 for 2 different reasons. Let's start with the biggest storyline, which is Bondgate.
Bondgate. We're not talking about the Oscars weird interlude for the James Bond movies for no reason, even though that also is Bondgate, and I'm also mad about that.
Isaiah Bond said he was going to run the fastest 40 time in the history of the combine. I think you and I both knew that was wrong. We both thought he was extremely fast, but didn't think he was 4.20 fast. I conservatively said, I bet 60% of people that attended the combine this year hadn't even heard of Isaiah Bond before coming to the event. And that seems fair. I think the number could be even higher, because this is not like, people like us, sickos that are going. This is families. This is people from Indy with kids. The entire place erupted when he got up to the line the first time. That is because he said he was going to be the fastest player ever. And then he ran a 4.42. So
it wasn't even close. That was the funny thing, is that Isaiah Bond, he gets up and he gets the raucous applause and he gets the excitement, and then over promise and under deliver. Like, we sit here and you say, I'm going to break the record. I think his teammate Jayden Blue also said something like he's going to try to break the record too. Yeah. And everybody's like, yeah, no, you're not. But Isaiah Bond, it was believable, because he does have those moments on tape where he just burns, and he comes up and, ends up with a 4.39, which is a fine time. If he wouldn't have done that, and that's where it all ends up, is if he doesn't say, I'm going to break the record, and then he runs a 4.39, it's like, oh, that's a little worse than I was expecting, but that's not bad. We kind of expect him to be more in the low 4.3s, maybe 4.35, but 4.39 is fine. But the spectacle that you put on, you get people to turn on the TV. I have friends of mine who don't normally watch the combine that are like, hey, do you know when Isaiah Bond's going up? It's like, all right, let's temper the expectations a little bit, because I don't think he's running a 4.2 flat. I don't know. It's going to be a while before we see somebody run that time.
Yeah. No, he did it to himself. He was a loser only because of what he did to himself. If he had never said it, I would not have viewed this as a negative performance. I wouldn't have viewed it as a good performance.
Right.
Because I do think his
Did he do drills?
He did.
I don't remember a single one.
Yeah, he was fine. That's the thing. So that's just it. This is the sort of thing where it's I've made a lot of excuses for this player. I'm not really sure if I want to keep doing that, because he's not showing me, if you're not running a 4.2, if you're not running the golden time, I don't know if I have a lot to cling on to.
Right.
Because you were a project that I thought was a 4.2 player. Now you're a project that's a 4.39 player. So it's a little bit different at that point.
Yep.
But the other name here is Tez Johnson, who is the, embodiment of, outlier. But the problem is when you're 154 pounds and we think you're kind of a freak, like on film, he looks extremely fast.
Yeah.
But like to run in the 4.5s at 154 pounds is problematic.
Yeah. It's really problematic. I want to like Tez Johnson so much. Like every time I watch him, I'm like, God, he's so twitchy. He's so quick. He gets deep, and people will argue the game speed versus the 40 speed, and I'll probably argue that a little bit. But like to come and put a stinker like this up, like I wish you'd have just not shown up. You shouldn't have got weighed or put your height on, like, because 5'10", 154. I think it's the second lightest wide receiver at the combine, and it's like, that's not something that NFL teams are going to buy. Like Tank Dell was a bridge too far, and he was like 10 pounds heavier than you, and he was, successful, got hurt, but like that's what teams are going to be concerned about, is you getting banged up. Devontae Smith won the Heisman, and people were talking about his weight, and he was like 15 pounds heavier than you. So like this is where we're at, is you weren't super productive in college. You have good, not great tape. And now you're like an outlier of all outliers on the size scale. Now you got to go put up incredible numbers. And then you also don't do that. So I don't know.
It might come back to bite us. This could be that moment next year where we're like, why did we fade Tez Johnson? But like this is one that you have to eventually just be like, all right, there's so much mounting evidence here. I like the film. Don't love the film.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yep. Can't love everybody.
Exactly. You can't, and that's okay. So let's speed it up maybe a little bit here. Let's save everybody else that's been here. I mean, I hope you guys are enjoying. But I'm enjoying as well. I'm having a blast. But for the sake of, getting this thing wrapped up in a reasonable time frame.
If you download your podcast, your storage space, your like Apple storage, this is going to be like 6 gigabytes.
And this will be much quicker. We're getting into tight ends. We will hit IDPs, but it'll be, we don't have nearly as many names to talk about here. Tight ends, 2 winners, one that tested, one that just did the drills. Terrance Ferguson was your best tester, which was not surprising because he's very athletic on film. And not a lot of the top guys tested at all. So he kind of stole the show in an environment that was wide open for the taking, really. And then Mason Taylor, who is one of our top guys. He did not run. He did not do any testing, I don't think. But he
I'll
did.
Check quick, but I don't think so.
He did participate in some of the drills. I know he was blocking.
Yeah. He participated in some of the drills. I think he did the gauntlet, and he looked really clean. He also measured in, which I really liked, that 6'5", 251, because that was one of the players that we were worried might be a little small. But with the smoothness that he has on tape, being at that like 250 mark, and then 6'5" is plenty, because we were talking about maybe flexing him out to slot, whatever, because he's such a good receiver. Who knows? But I really like the size numbers. And then Terrance Ferguson, also 6'5", 247, right around that 250 mark, with the times that he put up. And then he, I think, far and away looked the most comfortable as a receiver out of these tight ends.
Yeah, 9.81 RAS for Terrance Ferguson, a player that has solid film. Not a lot of work for him in that offense, but you see the athleticism show up on film. You see the makings of a player with talent. He's going to be, maybe tight end 6 in the class. I think that's where I have him right now. But in a class like this, that's saying something. He's, this is still a guy to keep your eyes on, a day 2 sort of tight end. Sleeper wise here, probably getting super deep on this one, but with how few and far between the tight ends that were testing were, and how uninspiring a lot of those performances were. Joshua Simon was a player that stood out as one of the more athletic guys. And I did go back and watch him. He's playing a lot of H-back for South Carolina. He's not a traditional tight end in any sense of the word, but that athleticism does show up on film. He's got yak skill. That shows up as well. So he's an interesting player, definitely a later tight end in the class, but probably a big winner from that tier in as a tight end.
Yeah, another one of those, who was that? And then you look back and it's like, oh, that was Josh Simon again. Like, he's having a really fun day. Another one of those guys that you got to go back and do a little deeper dive on and see if you can dig up some tape, because, some of these guys, it's just impossible to find tape on. But, yeah, definitely good day, athletic player, a little light at 240 and 6'4", so we'll see what kind of role he could fall into. But, guys this athletic, don't really let him slide through the cracks.
Losers. Probably a good thing we don't have to spend a lot of time here.
Yeah. We can we'll go Gunnar Helm first, because I think we have a longer conversation we had about the other name.
Okay.
Gunnar Helm definitely didn't have a very good day, but he also sprained his ankle. And that has to be noted. It was gnarly, and he didn't say anything. And I think that's like the tight end mentality, but also like now you have like a 4.4 RAS, and if nobody knows that you sprained your ankle, then they're just gonna look at the athleticism number and be like, oh, I'm out. But yeah, he had a tough day. Also measured in lighter than I expected him to be.
Yeah.
6'5", 241. I expected him to be kind of a bigger tight end, because what I liked was how fluidly he moved at his size. But if he's 240, it's like, all right, and you're not like really that fast. And like, I'd rather have Ferguson and Mason Taylor as like receiving tight end, and I need you to be kind of like the bigger dual threat, be a good blocker and a good receiver. And he's a solid, the blocking on tape is solid, but at 240 you can only do so much.
Yeah, he did jump before spraining his ankle, and the jumps were also bad. So
30 is the vertical.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable, like, even though he did injure himself, calling him a loser here amongst the group. The other one is Harold Fannin, who, it's hard to call him a big time loser here, but I think you and I were in agreement last week where it really felt like he needed to put up something remarkable to keep his name in this conversation, in which, you're Bowling Green, you got a lot of people talking against you. He didn't do that.
Mm-mm. Yeah, Fannin, I wanted him to have a good day, just so there was no ammo against him, because he's already, like you said, he's got the small school thing, the big production at a small school, the size, whatever. Like, I just wanted to see him put on a show where he dominates, and that's why I took him in the RAS draft, because I was like, kind of wish casting on him to have a good day. But he comes in at 6'3", 240. Don't love that. 4'7", 40. Would have loved that to be faster. The jumps, 34-inch vertical, 9-foot, 10-inch broad jump, not great. The shuttle and the cones also weren't great. It was just like everything was a little underwhelming. And then you get to like the routes, and again, it was nothing special. And so I just came away a little bit underwhelmed, maybe properly whelmed by Fannin, because it wasn't bad per se, but it wasn't the like huge day that I wanted him to have.
Yeah, it was not bad. It was not a like, wow, I'm very concerned by what I saw here.
It's not over.
Yeah, it's not over, but it does become a little bit easier to let the doubts creep into your mind when you have such a good tight end group, and you have players like Mason Taylor and Elijah Arroyo and maybe even Terrance Ferguson, like guys like that, you're like, maybe, I don't know, so, but we are still Fannin believers here.
We're fans.
We're fans
of Fannin.
Of Fannin.
Right.
Get it?
We're in the Fannin club.
All right. Lightning round style. This is an IDP program. Typically, we would go through each position group. In this case, I think it suffices to talk about IDPs as a collective, not only because we are up against the clock, but also because I think somewhat limited. A lot of guys just didn't test. So, or didn't do the full thing. So
our producers are threatening to shoot us if this goes over 2 hours.
Exactly. So in that sense, give me your top 3 IDP winners.
Nick Emanwari, easily.
Yeah. Mr. 10.
I mean, unbelievable day. I thought Jihad Campbell looked really impressive, really smooth, very athletic. And then I'll say Malachi Starks. I'll double up on DB because I thought that he looked really good, especially in the drills as like a free safety kind of thing, where we were like, is this a box guy or could he like kind of do both and be a hybrid?
Yeah, that's the funny part is Starks I've seen mentioned as a loser as well because he's got whatever the RAS ended up being, like 7 something, I think. Like watching the drills, he's not a loser. Like this, he's obviously a cut above when you're talking about playing safety. So I would also consider him a winner, despite what people are trying to tell you. Emanwari, obviously one of the biggest winners overall, which we expected him to be an absolute freak. The 10 was in the crystal ball here. He nailed it. He got all the attention on him right away on Friday night. So mission accomplished for him. I also agree Jihad Campbell. I will throw Shamar Stewart in there as well as like the edge that, in the absence of Abdul Carter, who's hurt, Michael Williams did not test. Jalen Walker, I don't know. I don't remember seeing Jalen Walker numbers, so I'm assuming he didn't test either. But Shamar Stewart was the size, speed, athleticism freak that put the numbers out for people to gush about. So definitely excited about what we saw with Stewart.
Jalen Walker did not do anything.
Yeah. So we had a lot of guys opting out.
He measured in at 6'1", 243, though.
Yeah. Small. I remember the measurements being very awkward if you're going to stick him at edge. So Stewart, don't have to worry about that at all. So also shout out Carson Schweisinger coming in at 242. That was a massive number. So
yeah, Schweisinger, who we thought might be kind of a hybrid safety linebacker deal, seems like we're wheels up on the linebacker train because 235 is big enough to play linebacker. 240 is almost like, all right, you got a little weight to spare. Yeah, cut down a little bit, buddy. Relax.
Slow down. All right. That is 2025. Combine winners and losers. Spend a lot of time talking about running backs and wide receivers, as we should, specifically running backs, because that's what we're here for. Running backs, it's not often that you get a class like this. It deserves to be talked about, especially when you had that many guys showing up and performing, at a very high level. So it was a blast. I'm glad we were able to go. I'm glad we were able to see it in person. That's probably a reason why this conversation goes longer, because having that context and being able to get excited about these guys, seeing Omarion Hampton look like a Greek myth creature.
I don't know how many times I was like, dude, look at Omarion Hampton.
So, all right. Like I said, next week, we are doing another Dynasty Rookie mock draft. It's back. We're back. It's been a while. Revisiting the class post-combine in totality and with a very special guest. You know him well. If you've listened for the last couple of years, we're bringing him back. It's Kaleb, a.k.a. Keel Pro 88. He will be here to help us mock draft. And the word on the street is that he already had a hot take about Matthew Golden before the 429. So I'm a little bit concerned about how high Golden could go in our draft next week. That is yet to be seen, but I'm excited about it.
Good tease right there. Tune in. I mean, we did rankings a while ago. It did great. The mock draft. We are fully into draft season. We're like a little over a month away from the NFL draft. We're about a week away from legal tampering. We're getting, some tags coming out. We're getting Sam Darnold will not be franchise tagged. And it's like, okay, we're going to have a quarterback on the market. So off season in full effect, mock draft on the way, baby.
It's all here. It's the best time of the year. I'm ready to do all of it. If you enjoyed our combine winners and losers, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. If you are on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like the video. I'm rescinding my take about protecting your likes folder. Press like. It's free. It's all good. Just do it. I'm learning. You can learn with me to just press like. And if you're on the pod feed, follow, share, review, whatever, star, follow. I don't know. There's so many different things you can do on Apple or Spotify. Just do something. It's appreciated by us.
We saw Arthur Smith in the hotel lobby and didn't assault him, and I think we deserve 5 stars for that. So,
amen.
Check that out on Spotify.
Restraint. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.